Hey there, pithy listeners. It's Erica and Caroline here. We are thinking about the people of Hawaii right now and the horrible fires that have destroyed so much of Maui and the historical center of Lahaina.
Not to mention the over 100 at the last count, lives lost. It's just an absolute tragedy, but I think you can see that the Hawaiian people are just so strong and they have such grit and determination. That's the only good takeaway I have from that.
Lahaina was the first royal capital of the Kingdom of Hawaii, founded by King Kamehameha I at the turn of the 19th century. And there is an entire area that is now gone to us that was once known as the Historic District, where the buildings were unfortunately wooden and coral stone, and they date back to the very first missionary settlers that came to the island. But as Erica said, we know that the Hawaiian people can get through this.
They're incredibly resilient.
And Erica has some good information. If you're looking for some place to donate and you want to ensure that it's going to the right cause.
I know it can be hard to find somewhere that seems reputable, that the money is going to the people, so I pulled this from New York Times. It's the Hawaii Community Foundation. Their mission is to inspire generosity, advocate for equity, and forge connections and invest in the community to create a better Hawaii. They have a special donation for the wildfires in Maui that you can give to. We will link that in our socials, and if you decide to give to somewhere else, just remember to check up with them on Candid or the National Nonprofit Foundation or GuideStar to make sure that you are giving to a reputable organization.
We want to re-release our episode about the Hawaiian Monarchy and its rise and fall as a way to remind people of the vast amount of history that those islands contain.
Absolutely. The cultural heritage there is so immense, but kind of undervalued in a lot of historical circles. And the fact that we have lost such an integral part of those foundations is really upsetting.
As Navy spouses, we have a lot of friends that have either lived in Hawaii or are currently stationed in Hawaii. And a lot of them have been posting recently, and I've talked to a few of them about this one image they have of Lahaina. And it's one that's been resonating on a lot of different news services. A 150-year-old banyan tree that is in the middle of this most historic district of Old Lahaina. It's where hula dancers are often performing. You might even find some wild chickens clucking around underneath the tree. It's memorable, it's magical, and just an enormous symbol of hope and strength for the Hawaiian people. Despite being slightly burned, it is standing, and it's actually being treated right now by a group of dedicated tree lovers that are determined to save it from its burns.
Oh, that's incredible.
Like the old banyan tree, let's make sure that we stand strong for Hawaii and give them as much support as we can. And with that, I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we are pithily yours.
Welcome back, pithy listeners. We hope you had a spooktacular October and enjoyed our ghoulish tales. And this week, too, we will begin in the realm of myth and legend before diving into the clear blue waters of Hawaii and its sacred ali'i, or royalty. This episode is going to be a two-parter. This week, we will discuss the rise of the Hawaiian Monarchy, and next week, you might have guessed it, we'll cover its fall.
Keep up with us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook so you don't miss an episode. And you just might find some historical comic relief to spice up your day.
All right, it's story time. Long before the written word reached Hawaiian shores, history was told through song, dance, and chant. And it all began with the kumulipo, a 3-hour chant that starts at the very beginning of the world and ends with the powerful Hawaiian chiefs.
Holy cow.
Right, 3 hours, good lord.
That's like ring cycle level.
I was thinking that too. According to the legend of Kumulipo, in the beginning, there was utter darkness named Papahanamoku, mother of the gods, the earth, and the underworld. There was also light from Wakea, or Father Sky. Together, Mother Earth and Father Sky created a world of opposites, light and dark, land and sky. And their daughter, Ho'ohokukalani, created the stars. But soon, Wakea's eyes began to wander, and eventually his desire for his own daughter, Ho'ohokukulani, led to the premature birth of an unformed fetus named Kalo. The devastated parents buried Kalo in the earth. Happily, the daughter-father pair had a second child who was healthy and strong, Haloa. Haloa became the first man on the newly formed earth and the first ancestor of the Hawaiian people. As Ali'i Nui, or high-ranking chief, he started the dynasty of Hawaii's royalty, and every Hawaiian chief after could trace their lineage back to the demigod. But what of the first brother Kalo, buried in the ground? From his grave grew the taro plant, a starchy root similar to the potato and the main food source of the Hawaiian people. So the first son fed the people, and the second led them into the future.
Now, Caroline, I recognize that you really like incest. Like, don't like it, but like it. But like...
Oh, girlfriend, I even have a whole portion about incest coming up.
Okay, because I was going to say, this is...
I mean, father-daughter incest is... Yeah, it's a story. But think about the Greek myths.
Yeah.
Venus, the goddess of love, was actually born of the foam of the sea after her father Uranus was overthrown and then castrated by his son Saturn. So, Roman myth, things get weird, things get wacky. I think we find that in almost all creation myths.
It's not just because it's this myth. I would have called it out because we have been so incest heavy, I feel like, this season.
Oh, then this is the perfect episode to continue the incest.
All right.
Love? I don't want to say love of incest, but we're certainly going to address it because it's a large part of the Hawaiian monarchy tradition. Yes, I said that.
Well,
as this story suggests, Hawaiians respected genealogy. They cared about who you were related to. Who was dad? Who was mom? That was very important.
coming from the South, who are your people? I get it.
Who are your people? Yeah, if they had 23andMe back then, holy cow, this would have been a huge hit. Ancestry.com would have exploded. So the chiefs were all descended from Haloa, or the gods, and it was their royal blood which gave them their sacred power. Historians estimate that the Hawaiian Islands were first settled as early as 400 CE. Polynesians from the Marquesas Islands, more than 2,000 miles away, traveled in canoes, seeking a better future. Or, as Moana says, they were voyagers.
Moana also features pretty heavily on the Mythic Chronicle.
What? I got little kids.
Yeah.
You gotta make it relevant.
Excellent.
So, without a written language, much of their history was lost. But through their cultural chants, songs, and dance, the stories remain.
I'm all here for the oral tradition. I'm ready for it.
Are you saying you're all about oral?
And moving on.
So we know that each island was ruled by individual chiefs who traced their noble blood back to the beginning, back to Haloa. The warring chiefs, or kings, administered their own lands while continually fighting for more, because each felt that their own godly connection, their royal lineage, was obviously the strongest.
Wow, nothing changes across time or cultures.
It does not matter where you are. It's unbelievable. So despite the constant warfare, Hawaii itself was pretty much a paradise. I mean, I think we all know that.
Yeah.
Even with intermittent volcanic eruptions and earth tremors, it was an easy place to live. Always warm, with lots of food, plenty of fresh water, and the cooling trade winds. Palm, hala, and mulberry trees provided food, shelter, even clothing. And the people, ruled by gods, lived according to kapu.
So, aside from me wanting to go get my hula skirt out and go lay on a beach.
You want to lay on a beach in a hula skirt?
I'm just...
The tan lines.
I mean...
Dreadful.
Fine. I just want to go to a resort with a cabana and a coconut.
And no children. That sounds great.
And no children.
Yeah, and alcohol.
So, beyond the idyllic setting and me trying to run away, what is kapu?
Well, kapu is not idyllic. It would not make for a great vacation, especially for you.
Oh.
It is the Hawaiian Code of Conduct that preserved the necessary distance between chief and commoner.
And how do you know I would be a commoner in this situation?
Well, you also would be a woman, and that would not bode well for you.
Fair.
Just wait.
Okay.
Yeah. Great question. But also, are you descended from Haloa?
Who knows?
Well...
I mean, no.
Your Scottish ancestry and multiple witches from your past say otherwise.
No, I would probably be an outcast and they would probably stone me quickly.
They do that, so that could happen. Whoops.
There
Okay.
we go.
So Hawaii at the time was a very stratified society, from the high-ranking class of the ali'i, or the nobles, to the commoners, or maka'enana. Everyone knew their place and followed the rules, and there were so many of them. I mean, the people needed incredible memories because, of course, they couldn't write anything down. They didn't have a written language.
So, are we talking Sun King Versailles level? That many?
That's a great... I thought about that comparison. It is similar to Sun King Versailles level of nitpicky.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like that.
But the consequences could be deadly.
Right. It's not just, we're gonna take your livelihood or you don't get to come watch the king poop. It's, we're gonna kill you.
Yeah, you definitely didn't get to watch the king poop.
Well.
Because you couldn't look at him. Hold on, we'll get there. Kapu dictated everything from sex to food, ceremony to fish. It restricted contact with chiefs and other people of spiritual power, and it separated men and women. Not only were they required to eat separately, but women were not allowed to ingest the godly foods, such as pork, bananas, coconuts.
I mean, like, those are the three best things.
Yep.
But also, like, if they don't eat that, what are they?
Oh, hold on. We're going to get there. Hold on.
Okay.
They also weren't allowed to eat the main food source of the islands, which was taro, because that was the fetal brother buried in the ground. In fact, taro was so sacred that women couldn't even prepare it.
I'm sorry, women couldn't prepare it? It's a fetus. Like, who else would be qualified?
It makes me think of Harry Potter when they pull the mandrake. It looks like that.
But my point is, if the origin is supposed to have been a miscarriage or a fetus, who better to prepare it than a woman? It certainly isn't a man that's going to suffer from that.
True. And yet, here we are. If they can't eat the taro, they can't prepare the taro. Can't eat the big fish. No coconut, no banana, no pork.
None of that. So what do they eat?
Seaweed, from what I've read.
Is that it?
The Hawaiian culture relied on seaweed more than any other Polynesian diet, mostly because they had to give something to the women.
I mean, were these women just tiny little slips?
Oh, no, they were not. The larger, the better, my love. No.
So how did they get large?
They could eat some things. They could eat some things. Little fish, chickens, other plants.
Well,
but they weren't eating the good stuff, is what we really need to clarify here. And it's all because of this kapu system of who could do what, when, and where. Kapu was incredibly rigid, and the intricate rules, as I said, were not taken lightly. Death was a common punishment for breaking the rules. So let's look at an example. Commoners were not allowed to look upon someone of noble rank. Ali'i Nui, who were the highest-ranking chiefs on the individual islands, were so closely related to gods that everyone else, from commoners to even lesser-ranked nobles, must immediately lie face down in the ground when in their presence.
I mean, that's downright biblical.
It is. It's like prostrating themselves.
Yeah.
To help out, the highest chiefs would actually usually travel by night to prevent accidents, quote-unquote, wherein an unsuspecting commoner would unintentionally just happen upon them and thus pollute the chief's nobility.
I mean, I guess that's kind of considerate.
But if it was an accident or not, breaking kapu meant death, and so the unlucky commoner would be immediately killed.
My lord, do you just
for looking at him?
I feel like I would just look at the floor all day.
So, from what I read, they lived in very different parts of the island. So the chiefs did not just walk freely to the marketplace. They had a very different and secluded area, which is why when they traveled, they would try to do it at night.
Okay.
But yeah, you know, if you happen to see it, it's basically like a human sacrifice, which also was a not common, but certainly not uncommon thing in the Hawaiian culture at the time. Because by violating kapu and looking upon the demigod or high chief, the commoner then struck down that hierarchical difference between the sacred and the profane. And so the king, to purify himself, must destroy the transgressor to, you know, keep his holiness pure.
So, like, how long did this go on? Like, is this
about 1,000 years?
Okay.
This was their thing. They had kapu. You know, I don't want to get into all the details of it because it does apply to today's episode, but it's not the point of it. But you can go online and have a field day looking at all the rules. And of course, they weren't written down. So they are told via legend, chant, etc. But they were a very rigid system that the Hawaiian people, I don't want to say cherished, but relied upon to kind of keep society together. The chiefs especially needed this to make sure they got to stay at the top and other people were at the bottom. But more than that, I think it gave the culture a bit of certainty, a bit of...
And humans love order.
That's right. We naturally tend toward it. And no matter if you were at the top or the bottom, at least you knew where you stood.
Okay.
But change was on the horizon.
Great.
For the women, thank God. In the winter of 1778, the refreshing trade winds of the Pacific blew the HMS Resolution and its crew, commanded by the famous explorer Captain James Cook, to Hawaii's shores. Though his first encounter with the island archipelago was very brief, Captain Cook returned the following year in 1779, sailed around the island chain for 8 weeks, and then landed on the Big Island of Hawaii. There he remained for about a month, and he was honored with a visit by King Kalaniʻopuʻu, who ruled Hawaii and the Hana district of Maui. So at this time, each island was ruled by its own chief and had its own stratified community, and they were still warring, but it was pretty evenly divided island by island. However, tensions began to rise. Though the ali'i, or the nobles, the highest nobles, respected and welcomed Cook and his crew, the inadvertent breaking of kapu, wherein British sailors unknowingly took wood from a sacred Hawaiian burial ground, led to disaster.
Yeah, I bet it did.
And it's not like they could walk into Hawaii and they'd be like, oh my gosh, sorry, here's our pamphlet of rules. Be sure to follow them.
Yep.
You know, this would be so different for a British explorer to just step into this world, or a British sailor, and have all these new regulations. And they didn't know that they were breaking them.
Right.
But it was gonna hurt. So, in response to stealing the sacred wood, the Hawaiians then stole one of Cook's small boats. And thus Cook, in his infinite wisdom, decided to kidnap and ransom the old king Kalaniʻopuʻu for the return of his boat.
Yeah, that seems rational and even.
Yeah, a boat for a person.
Yep.
And a king, no less.
And a king, no less.
It shows confidence on Cook's part of where he felt he was in this pecking order.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's very domineering.
Yeah.
Cook marched through the village to find the king, took him by the hand, and led him away.
Oh, that is touching.
Touching.
Yeah, that's not going to turn out well for him.
No, if you can't look at someone,
You
touching
certainly
him
can't
is-
touch him.
no.
And hand-holding does not strike me as something you do with the king.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, also, what a pathetic ransom. Like, come on, dude, let's go. Cook didn't understand the delicate and detailed world of kapu, and thus his actions were viewed by the Hawaiians as dangerous.
Right.
A kahuna, or priest, began to chant, and that called a large crowd to form around them. Captain Cook was unaware of the severity of his transgression, although I would think kidnapping any person would be not a great plan. And while he turned to launch his boats, he was struck on the back of his head with a heavy club before being stabbed to death.
Yep. Honestly, though, maybe not the worst way. We've had some pretty gruesome ways to go. Could be worse.
It could be worse. It could be worse. And frankly, the Hawaiians did human sacrifices in worse ways.
Yeah.
So it could have been worse.
Could have been worse.
But, you know, this is a very famous man just brought down because he touched someone. / tried to kidnap him.
But maybe you shouldn't be a butt.
Maybe you shouldn't be a butt. there you go, Captain Cook.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I want to make sure we're fair, 4 Marines were also killed and 2 others wounded in this little skirmish. I don't know how their deaths went, I'm sorry to say. So despite the murder of Captain Cook, the leader of the expedition on the HMS Resolution, the Hawaiian people, and the ruling class especially, saw the opportunities that were offered by continued relations with the West. And thus, they did prepare Cook's body with traditional Hawaiian funerary rites, to include disemboweling and baking his body to remove the flesh, and then the bones were cleaned and preserved as religious icons.
Like medieval holy relics? That's the...
Very similar, yeah. Here is the bone of a saint, here is the tibia of Captain
Cook. Also, I would like to say that, what was that conversation? Oh, guys, this was a really great interaction. I think that we can do this again. Maybe they'll bring a new ship.
I don't know how they
people.
managed to... New ship, come back! Actually, people return. We're going to talk about him in a minute, but there was a man who was on the ship who returns about 10 years later and starts a very prosperous relationship with the Hawaiian people. So this did not scare them off. So either Hawaii was that much of a paradise, or maybe, I think there was some, oopsie, we didn't mean to kill your captain, but he was trying to steal our chief. And then the Brits were like, oopsie, we didn't understand kapu, but we got it now. We'll just call this even, and we'll move on with our day.
I still think it's weird, but okay, go ahead. Or maybe not weird, but the logic is not point A to point B. There's some scribbling along the way.
There had to be some inner workings along the way. They did, however, give back some of his body for a Christian burial at sea, but not all of it.
Yeah. You gotta keep your trophies.
Oh! So while this interaction with the West, as we said, didn't exactly end well, it did open the islands to outside influence for the first time in more than 1,000 years. And interestingly, unlike many other quote-unquote discovered islands, you know, when Westerners would come and find a new place that we thought had been undiscovered, similar to maybe Japan with its isolationist approach to foreigners, Hawaii generally embraced new visitors and didn't kill many more of them. You know what I mean?
Oh, I got the joke. I think, I don't know that I thought it was funny though. That's...
And one man in particular shaped the island's future. Kamehameha I, frequently called Kamehameha the Great, was born around 1758. I've seen some things that say 1736, and I've seen some dates as late as 1760, so we'll just go ish. He is a circa baby, a male circa baby.
Ooh, love that.
Mostly because he wasn't born to the throne, and they didn't have a written language.
Oh, he wasn't born to the throne. That sounds...
Isn't this exciting?
Fascinating.
He was born nephew to King Kalaniʻopuʻu of the Big Island, Hawaii. And though the king's eldest son, Kiwalao, was heir to the throne, Kamehameha was a respected member of the family and the king's confidant. In fact, it was Kamehameha who accompanied his uncle to meet Captain Cook when the British explorer first landed on Hawaiian shores. I do not know if he was present for the death. King Kalaniʻopuʻu honored his nephew with a very prominent religious position. He gave him custody of the Hawaiian god of war. That really meant that he was in charge of the temple and that he made sure the god was venerated and respected. But Kamehameha began to flex his newfound authority. And when a captured rebel chief was brought to the war god's temple to be sacrificed, the heir to the throne, Kiwalao, came to the war god's temple to perform the ritual sacrifice for his ailing father, the king. However, after beginning the ritual, Kiwalao was interrupted by the cocky Kamehameha, who took the slain body from his cousin / soon-to-be king and finished the ceremony himself.
I can't imagine that went over well.
No. Would you do this to the soon-to-be king? I would not.
I would not. No.
Kiwalao was not thrilled. In fact, he was pretty pissed.
Shocking.
And he never forgave his insolent cousin.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I'd be pissed.
Kiwalao was already... People weren't sure about him taking over. He had a younger brother that people liked a lot more. He just was kind of weak, people felt. So the fact that his cousin was able to just interrupt him did
Well,
not
yeah,
bode well
I mean-
for his rule. And I think he definitely saw it as a message that Kamehameha was definitely sending.
And you know good and well, people started to talk and said, he took that dead body out of your hands, and what
How
did
can you
do?
possibly be a good ruler now?
What did you do? You didn't slay him, you didn't kill him, you just let him do it.
The dying king, Kaliana Opu'u, actually feared for his nephew's life. He thought maybe his son would try to kill him. And so he sent him away for his protection, where he lived with his family on a different island, tending to the war god and kind of biding his time. As one biographer said of Kamehameha, quote, "True kings are seldom satisfied to take second best."
Yeah, that rings true. But why give him the war god? That just seems a little too symbolic.
Well, Kamehameha was a wonderful warrior. It does feel like the uncle was setting his son up for failure, I think.
Yeah.
But the problem is that Kamehameha is not of the highest ranking nobility. He is not the perfect blood ruler. The son is. And so the
But you're still
Hawaiians-
giving him the god of war to tend. Don't you think that deity is going to rub off a
I
little
think
bit?
he was hoping that would satisfy the nephew. That it would be, I respect you, I know you're a warrior, I'm giving you this, but you know you can't have more. Except upon the old king's death. His son and heir, Kiwala'o, immediately allied himself with an uncle and a half-brother, and then intentionally provoked a quarrel with his rival Kamehameha, leading to the Battle of Moku Ohai. And as you've likely guessed, Kamehameha was victorious, and Kiwala'o was killed. Kind of brought that on himself.
Yeah, I mean, if he's not provoking you, maybe you should just let him be.
But Kamehameha did not stop there. He continued fighting. He battled the chiefs of Maui, Lanai, and Molokai. He didn't want just one island. He wanted them all. With an armada of 960 war canoes, and let me tell you, I love the idea,
War canoes?
the visual of war canoes in an armada.
Yes.
And 10,000 soldiers, Kamehameha won a decisive battle on the island of Oahu in 1795. Armed with traditional Hawaiian spears as well as muskets, he pursued his enemy until they were trapped on a mountaintop. And their choices were surrender or jump. Or be pushed, which may or may not have happened.
Again, not a bad way to go considering.
I guess, yeah. It was a 1,000-foot drop to their deaths, and over 400 men either jumped or were forced off said cliff.
Yeah, I mean,
It would be splat. Imagine the cleanup from
terrible.
that.
They just probably let the water do it. But
I guess.
I guess I'd rather jump off a cliff than be boiled alive.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think anybody can beat Vlad the Impaler. We could have some sort of a survey and ask our listeners, but so far,
Yeah.
he wins most evil.
Ways to go.
Ways to go. Oh, that would be hilarious. We should do that. Historical ways to go. Iron Maiden, impaling, boiled
Blood
alive,
eagle.
drowned in a vat of wine, which we've seen more than once.
Yes.
So here he comes. He won this decisive battle, kills more than 400 men off of this cliff, and by 1810, Kamehameha had all of the Hawaiian Islands within his kingdom. And he did that for the last few with peaceful agreements, because, you know.
Yeah, I don't want to jump off a 1,000-foot cliff. Start with force, end with peace.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
yeah, like if you make one big statement, then you don't necessarily have to resort to that for the
He
rest
brought
of
the
it.
drama for the first bit, and then everyone else was like, just kidding, welcome. So that is how Kamehameha I became king of all Hawaii and founded the Kamehameha dynasty.
Okay, so let's go back a second. They fought with spears and muskets, which implies...
Yes, Kamehameha wasn't just a talented warrior, he was also a great statesman. He cultivated international relationships and glad-handed foreign officials to keep European powers happy, letting Great Britain, France, the United States, and Russia all believe that they had a very special relationship with Hawaii. But in terms of the muskets, they came from a man named George Vancouver, who had sailed, as I said, under Captain Cook in 1778 and 1779. But then he returned himself, bravely, in 1792, bringing new plants, animals, and firearms to the islands.
Yeah, that man has way more balls than I do.
Why would you go back? He just, again, I don't understand how that situation got resolved so easily. I would not be as forgiving.
Maybe Cook was not as great as we think. Maybe there was a mutiny brewing anyway. I don't know, but let me tell you what, my butt would not have gone back.
It was paradise.
Mm-mm.
Well, he did. And along with the first cow that he brought, which would go on to father a very profitable cattle industry, Vancouver also brought guns. And though he had a noted personal disbelief in trading of arms, evidently he broke his own rule out of friendship for Kamehameha in an effort to help him defeat the other islands' warring chiefs.
Because they had such a special relationship.
Exactly. I don't know how Kamehameha felt about George Vancouver, but Vancouver was positive they were besties. In fact, he actually helped Kamehameha resolve a personal dispute with his favorite wife. His favorite wife, and arranged for him to get a British armed man-of-war ship as a gift from the British government.
I mean, my gosh, an arms dealer and a therapist, one-stop shop.
That's a special kind of friend.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Hey, I think I was a bestie too.
It's hard to say what Kamehameha thought, but he was very good at cultivating relationships. It's especially exciting and surprising considering he came from a society that had absolutely no outside influences up until he was in his 20s.
Oh, wow.
Or later. It's brand new. They have never seen any of these things. And he's like, all right, this has potential. I'm going to roll with this. It's impressive.
He is called Kamehameha the Great.
That's true. And he made a number of great friends along the way, such as 2 British sailors whom he technically captured.
Okay, that does not sound great.
Well, okay, but he did reward them with marriages to royal Hawaiian women and made them chiefs.
Not great, but the best option for a kidnapping scenario, I feel.
That's fair, yeah.
Raised me to be a deity? Okay.
Their descendants did go on to rule Hawaii, so...
Certainly could have been worse.
I think it's interesting that, uniquely, the Hawaiians did not seem to have any problem with interracial marriage.
Really?
They were very open
Yeah.
to this new world, these new opportunities, this new culture. They did not seem to bother them. I mean, they had Russians coming in, Americans, Brits, French, and they were like, cool, okay.
And like you said, to have previously such isolationist policies to just...
Well, they didn't have isolationist policies. They didn't know.
Oh.
They only knew of the islands. They warred amongst themselves. They didn't have contact with the outside world because they didn't know it was there.
I see.
Not because they were being isolationist, unlike Japan.
Who knew? And we're just like, don't talk to me.
No, we're going to be insular. So this was a very different approach.
You can't sit with us.
Oh, speaking of, men and women can't sit together when they eat in Hawaii.
Oh.
Well, according to Kapu. So anyway, these British sailors, or now Hawaiian chiefs, acted as his political and military intermediaries. He used their knowledge, their language, and their skills to help him understand this Western world of trade, negotiation, and warfare. But while he was very progressive in a lot of ways, he was still an autocratic ruler, absolutely no democracy, and he held true to the ancient ways. He venerated the old deities, and of course, he kept Kapu.
Okay.
Under his shrewd leadership, Honolulu Harbor exploded with trade. I mean, from 0 to 160 seconds. But, as we've seen in so many other historical tales, with trade comes disease.
I get the feeling we're gonna have a plague.
Of sorts, yeah.
Ish.
Previously, the Hawaiian people had been almost disease-free as they'd been isolated for nearly a millennium. So...
Okay.
pretty much all the germs had run through. But now, venereal disease ran rampant. Measles and other European diseases plagued the Hawaiian population. And those that survived the illnesses were often struck down by liquor or firearms. David Swanson from the University of California estimates that 1 in 17 Native Hawaiians died within just 2 years of Cook's arrival.
Holy cow.
By 1800, 22 years after Cook arrived, the population had declined by 48%.
Oh my God.
Wait for it. By 1820, so 40 years later, it had declined by 71%. And by 1840, the Hawaiian population was diminished by 84%.
That's unreal, man.
These numbers are crazy. I've never seen any numbers like this before.
Yeah.
It was
Devastating.
almost a complete wipeout. And I think, honestly, the population is lucky that they survived. So while the foreign powers were getting rich off of Hawaii's trade industry, the native Hawaiians were literally dying in droves. By 1920, the native Hawaiian population was under 24,000 people.
Oh my gosh.
A slight happy side note, the population has since rebounded. There's obviously been a lot of interracial marriage and lots of babies, but the Hawaiian population continues to grow, and as of 2015, more than 560,000 Americans claim to be at least some part Native Hawaiian. So the race didn't recover, but it did find its way, it's clawing its way back.
It's not nothing.
Could have been worse. Kamehameha I was, as we said at the very beginning, not meant to be king. Though royal, he was not a li'inui, or the most noble bloodline. Rather, he was born to a lesser chief, and therefore his entire dynasty was founded on fathers of lesser nobility who then married higher-ranking wives, slowly trying to crawl back up that noble birth chain.
Well, it's kind of nice to see women having some sort of value, but I guess it's still the same.
Women, the chiefesses, they do have far more power than you would think. So while the stratified situation of kapu is really rigidly enforced, it is not indicative of women's importance, especially of royal women's importance. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, they can't eat together, but the women and what they say is very respected all the same.
Okay.
It was more like, it's not clean for us to eat together than it is, it's not clean for me to eat near you. And so here we have Kamehameha founding a new dynasty, but the ranking system, kapu, still there. Kamehameha himself had 5 wives, multiple wives being quite common amongst Hawaiian royalty. Actually, I saw that Wikipedia lists 11 spouses. I don't know about the other 6, but you know what? In the end, we're only going to talk about 2 of them.
Yeah.
So we'll just let him have his fun.
Little mini harem.
Oh, just wait.
Oh, God.
His highest ranking wife was Keopuolani. Her father was Kiwa'alo, the cousin whom Kamehameha had killed for the throne.
Oh, my.
And her mother was Queen Kekuiapoiwa Liliha, the half-sister of Kamehameha.
That makes my brain hurt.
She was described in history books as his quote-unquote niece wife, but she was also his first cousin once removed.
I really hope this is not the favorite wife.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's just the most noble.
Okay.
Fair enough.
There we go.
I'm going to take a minute to talk about incest.
You?
Which we all know is one of my favorite topics. It's just fascinating how...
Maybe it's because you're an only child.
I think what it is that, and I read a couple of psychology papers on incest when I was doing the research into this, because most cultures do not believe in incest. It is something that most cultures just naturally decide against because it feels icky.
Yes.
The same is said with animals, that most species choose not to, because biologically it's not good. We know from the Habsburg jaw that bad things happen when intermarriage just gets crazy. But royal cultures like incest because it keeps the bloodline pure. For example, in Hawaii, incestuous relationships were very common amongst the nobility, but the commoners would not have done this. It is something that is just about creating this link, this genealogy. The word incest does not exist in the Hawaiian language, but obviously, as we saw at the beginning, incestuous relationships are at the very core of Hawaiian myths and legends. Daddy-daughter, divine couple.
For Hawaiians people.
You know.
Yeah.
Most Polynesian societies preferred intra-status marriages, i.e. you only marry your own rank, your own kind. But Hawaiian royalty took this to the extreme. For high-ranking chiefs, special care was taken to select the nearest possible relative for a wife. Not just a near relative, but the nearest.
The nearest.
What would you think that could be, Erica?
I mean, a sister?
Yeah. For most men, that would be their sister or their half-sister because they had multiple wives and husbands.
Oh my gosh.
And so it's hard to say exactly, but brother-sister marriages were regarded as the highest degree of nobility. So if you have most high-ranking marrying most high-ranking, they make baby that would actually be considered divine, equal to the gods, and of the highest possible kapu rank.
Well, how did they explain that after generations of inbreeding and then they're just not the sharpest tool in the shed?
I had that same question. I could not find that to be an issue. I'm sure it was. Next week, we will see a lot of childless couples.
Can't imagine why.
From half-brother and half-sister relationships or cousins or nieces or whatever. But that's not covered before. Remember, no written language, so we just don't know how many problematic births they had. The fact that their culture talks about this daddy-daughter fetus that was born unformed and became the taro plant does suggest that they had some knowledge of fetuses being born irregularly. So maybe it was more common because of this. I just don't know. I did read something that said that the Hawaiian men chose to marry their sisters in part to make sure that they kept the royal bloodline only to themselves. Because if they are of the highest kapu, and so is sister, and then they marry someone slightly less, and sister marries someone slightly less, kids are equal. And now their kid isn't guaranteed, it could be sister's kid. Because male and female genealogy was looked at. It wasn't just from the male point of view. It was both.
I got it.
I think there's some of all of those things in there. But back to Kamehameha's niece wife. She was extremely powerful, despite her gender, because she had the most noble blood. Keopuolani was also the mother of his first son and heir, Liholiho. He also had a favorite wife, Ka'ahumanu, who was beautiful and encouraged him to unify the islands via war. So they really got along well, they kind of thought together. And because she was his favorite, Kamehameha gave Enhanai, his firstborn son Liholiho, to her. And Liholiho would go on to one day be king.
Okay, what is this hanai and giving of children?
Hanai is a fascinating aspect of Hawaiian culture, and it means adoption, but not in a rigid sense. You know the phrase, you can't choose your family? Well, in this case, you kind of can-ish.
Okay.
Instead of giving away children, it's more like sharing. Upon birth, most royal babies, and many common babies as well, not that any baby is common, they're all special and perfect, they would be given in hanai to adopted families. Often blood relatives, think uncles, cousins, but sometimes just connections of friendship. And it was binding for life. They were considered to be a child of their foster parents. They would be treated the same as the biological children of those parents. So you kept some, you hanai some. Ancient Hawaiian tradition states the biological parents would say, quote, yours is the child, excreta, intestines, and all.
Well, there you have that.
I think it's much more beautiful in Hawaiian because it doesn't sound it here. But while they were raised as biological children by their hanai family, they still maintained contact with their biological family. It's all about expanding one's nuclear family, and it strengthens relationships between family members because if you're sending your kid to be raised by your brother, then you and your brother will remain closer, probably communicate more than you would otherwise.
Sure.
As I said, it wasn't just for the ali'i, kings to farmers. The Hawaiian culture really embraced hanai.
Well, I mean, it takes a village.
With the exception of some of these ali'i, if it was a commoner practice, it's probably like 3 doors down. It wasn't that far. You could still see the kid regularly.
Right. You're not going across island or to a different island.
As Hawaii's final monarch said, hanai, quote, seems perfectly natural to us. This alliance by adoption cemented the ties of friendship between the chiefs. It spread to the common people, and it has doubtless fostered a community of interest and harmony.
Yeah, I think this is a really beautiful part of the culture.
I like it. I don't know that I could do it from a modern standpoint, but the thing is, we can't view it through our lens.
Yeah. exactly.
However, I was able to find a study about contemporary cases of Hanai. While it is not as common today, it is still practiced in Hawaii.
Oh, look at that.
Again, not often. I think it's special case-by-case basis. But one Hanai child, who is now an adult, said that it made him, quote, more complete, knowing I was raised and loved by so many as if I were their own. And then he corrected himself and said, quote, I am their own. I belong to them all.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It's a lovely
That makes
thing.
me want to cry.
Aw.
Look at that.
In 1819, Kamehameha the Great, the uniting monarch, died. And his eldest son, one of his 13 children, ascended the throne as Kamehameha II.
You know what? I'm already upset with this. Do not go the same name route. I just want to be able to tell you apart.
Oh, girl, just wait. Kamehameha I is followed by the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth all in a row.
Oh, guys.
Not helpful, people. Especially without a written language. That just makes it way more confusing. Kamehameha II was the son of the Great, and the most noble of the Great's wives, Keopuolani. He had been Hanai'd from birth to the favorite wife, Ka'ahumanu. However, while his bloodline was royally thick, he was not made of the same stuff as his father.
Well, if that blood is that thick, it's not going to flow right.
What?
I mean, think about it. If you've got thick blood, it's going to clot.
You could also just say that, niece wife wasn't a great idea.
Sure.
Yeah. He is generally described as unstable, dissolute, weak, and ineffectual.
Well, there you have it.
Yep, that's quite a list of adjectives. Mm-hmm. As he stood in the traditional red and yellow feather regalia, by the way, red and yellow feathers were kapu to any but the chiefs, just a little example, swearing himself to his people, his father's widow, the favorite Ka'ahumanu, his Hanai mommy, stepped forward and claimed his father, Kamehameha the Great, had actually really wanted her to rule, and so maybe they could just, be kind of co-rulers. Now, Erica, if you were mid-coronation in your finest regalia, and your stepmom walked up on stage, stopped the ceremony, and claimed your dead dad actually wanted her to rule, what would you do?
Not be nice.
No.
Not be nice at all. I'd be mad.
It is a Taylor Swift, Kanye West moment.
It is. And I'm... No, thank you.
There would be an internet backlash
to
no end. The Hawaiian gossips must have gone crazy. But he did nothing.
What?
Kamehameha II made absolutely no objection, just kind of nodded, and instead he immediately split his power and named Ka'ahumanu his kuhina nui, or vice king.
Well, that is something I was not expecting.
No, this would not be what I would do. But this woman had raised him. I mean, stepmom, but also Hanai mom. Still, it's very Catherine de Medici.
It is.
He then further divided his power with the other chiefs, who saw this and instantly recognized weakness, and they were like, boom, we're gonna need a share of the valuable sandalwood trade profits. And he was like, okay.
Holy cow.
And then his biological mother also stepped in for her slice of the pie. So in the end, Kamehameha II ruled alongside his most noble mommy and his most aggressive stepmom.
Well, that does not bode well for Kamehameha.
No, rocking a hard place, this guy.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that these powerful women did was convince their son/stepson that the kapu system, the rules and regulations Hawaiians had followed for more than 1,000 years, really just needed to go.
Yep.
I can't disagree.
Gotta agree.
One fateful evening at a feast in Kailua, weeks after his ascendance to the throne, and in front of the ali'i and foreigners, 22-year-old Kamehameha II simply sat down in an empty chair at the women's table and began to eat.
Oh my gosh.
And that, as we say, is that. Almost instantly, the rigid kapu system was gone. As if by this one small action, Kamehameha II had erased 1,000 years of strict social structure and hierarchy. Idols and temples were abandoned, old ways ignored, food eaten. I'm sure the women were like, holy crap, this is what a banana tastes like.
That would have been my first priority.
Hawaiian traditional culture basically completely collapsed.
Oh my god. It was a really big chair to pick.
It was a really big deal, considering he just sat down at the next table. Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
And this left Hawaii with a religious power vacuum. This was how they lived their lives. And now, nearly overnight, the Hawaiian people just lost their culture. Poof.
Oh my god. And so what did they do?
Fortunately, or not so fortunately, depending on your point of view, the Protestant missionaries literally floated in on the tides. Their timing could not have been more perfect or, well, more divine.
Divine.
Yes. The Hawaiian people, newly set adrift by the overthrow of their religion and culture, were the perfect audience for these devout missionaries who were, here to help.
Okay, but here's what I want to know.
Okay.
He did that, and I understand that you follow your king or whatever, but I'm really kind of surprised that people didn't
This also meant that if they accidentally saw him, they wouldn't be clubbed to death.
That's true, and that's great. That's wonderful.
Great.
But,
So Kapu, I think for the average person, it gave them stability in knowing where they stood. But this is 40 years after Hawaii has opened to the Western world. They have a lot of British and U.S. nationals living there now. So
right.
They're seeing a very different interaction between men and women.
Right.
They're watching a merchant class come in because the people that are coming to Hawaii from other areas are not kings and queens. They are merchants. They are selling things. They might even be farmers. People are coming in that are making a ton of money and living lavish lifestyles with zero royal blood.
And also, no restrictions.
There is no way these people were related to Haloa.
Right.
And they had no restrictions. If they saw the king, they weren't going to get clubbed to death.
Right.
The woman could sit down with her kids and have dinner, and that was not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Kamehameha II was weak. Yeah. And his mom and his stepmom were super powerful.
Right.
But I think women were ready for this to go.
Yeah, I want pork.
Which we can see why. The crushing of the gods and everything else, I find really interesting that it couldn't maintain some, but not all. But I think Kapu was so intrinsically part of the creation myth.
Right.
From the beginning.
If you're gonna get rid of one, you gotta get rid of all.
He took out the foundation, and then everything else just toppled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
King Kamehameha II actually became a devout Protestant pretty quickly after the missionaries arrived, although he never officially converted because he refused to renounce all of his wives. Though he did have a favorite whom he said was his true wife, but the others still got to be there. And he didn't want to give up alcohol. Priorities.
Again, okay.
He created missionary schools and insisted that all royal children be educated like Westerners. He required them to read and write in English, and they went to the chief's school, which was specifically for chief's child relatives, because of course there's a lot of degrees of relationships here.
Well, there you go.
At the same time, the printing press arrived, and that finally put the Hawaiian language into print. Kamehameha II's Kuhina Nui, his vice king / stepmom, she also converted, but she too refused to give up her two husbands, the king of Kauai and his son.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I have questions. I have so many questions.
None of them are podcastable.
No, but they're still there.
They're still there. Like, why?
So if someone has answers to these questions that are still there, do let us know. pithychronicle@gmail.com. In 1819, the whaling ships also arrived, and they just kept on coming. A weak monarch, Kamehameha II, enabled the government's abuse of power. As king, he could give and take land freely, which he did. A lot, and usually on a whim. Hawaiians and foreigners alike were victims of his caprices. And unlike his father, Kamehameha II was unsure how to maintain a special relationship with multiple foreign entities. In particular, the American and British nationals, who were these wealthy merchants that wanted duty-free trade with their home nations so that they didn't pay taxes, developed very strong and very destructive rivalries that would start to tear the island and even the ali'i, the royalty, apart in different directions. In 1823, at just 26 years old, Kamehameha II and his favorite wife, his half-sister, Kamamalu, set sail for England, accompanied by many other noble-blooded chiefs and chiefesses. It was the first international trip for the Kamehameha dynasty.
And the last?
No, it'll be his last, but not everyone.
That's what I figured.
Yeah, no, others will go, but he won't come back. 6 months later, they arrived in Portsmouth and headed for London, and needless to say, their arrival was met with extreme curiosity, in no small part due to their large stature. Queen Kamamalu herself was over 6 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
Even though this is only 200 years ago, people generally were shorter back then, so everybody was like, look it up. Oh, God. They toured the Capitol, attended the opera, went to the ballet, and had their portraits painted.
Is there any surviving...
Yes, there is a surviving portrait.
reaction? Like, what did they think of it, you know?
No, we don't know that. Because a month into their visit, they were scheduled to meet King George IV, but it was postponed because Kamamalu became ill with measles.
Oh, dear.
And it quickly spread to the entire Hawaiian court abroad. And just like their subjects before them, their lack of immunity proved fatal.
Oh, dear.
Queen Kamamalu died 2 weeks later, and her grief-stricken husband, King Kamehameha II, followed. The young couple's bodies were returned to Hawaii, and because they had no children, it was the king's younger brother who would now step onto the throne, becoming King Kamehameha III. Yeah, I know.
Okay, there we go.
I think it is, in some ways, pretty poetic that the weak Kamehameha died abroad, just as his kingdom teetered precariously upon these rocky relationships that he created with numerous interested foreign powers.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised they didn't think, oh, they definitely killed him on purpose. How did they not?
I think because some of the royal court survived measles, so they were able to return and be like, no, we just got sick. Why they didn't think they'd catch it when, at this point, 71% of their population had died, I don't know. One of the things you have to think about with these kings and with the dynasty, we obviously know it's rising now, but it's going to fall here in just a second, is that they are doing well with the trade. They're bringing people in, but their population, their people are gone.
Yeah.
71% of the population is dead by this point. So that's one of the ways the kapu system could fall, because clearly it's hard to maintain the same belief system when your entire world has literally been killed. Kamehameha III was just 9 years old when his brother died, and we all know how well that usually works out. Kamehameha II's weakness and his destruction of the old ways left a power vacuum that just couldn't be filled by a young prince. And next week, we'll hear how it slowly begins to fall apart.
Wait.
What?
That's the cliffhanger you're leaving me on?
Yeah.
That's a big cliffhanger.
Till next week. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we are Pithily Yours.
Welcome back, Pithy listeners. Last week, we discussed Hawaii's Kamehameha the Great and his unification of the island chain, the rise of a quote-unquote traditional monarchy, and the overthrow of its 1,000-year-old religion and traditions. But as we went along, we also heard how Hawaii's open arm policy toward foreigners and new ideas led to the devastating loss of 84% of the native Hawaiian population.
Just fathom that.
I can't.
84%.
I mean, we talk about a lot of atrocities in American history. November is now, because we're trying to revamp the whole Thanksgiving fiction.
Myth.
So now it's the Indigenous Peoples Month, and Hawaiians deserve their place. 84% were devastated by opening up to the West, and then, as we'll see today, the United States didn't do great things.
I'm shocked, obviously.
I don't want to get into debates about whether or not it's history. It's too late, but people were hurt.
It's history. It's too late. Okay. Jesus, Caroline, then why are we doing the podcast if it's too late? We can't fix, but we can learn from it.
Exactly. We can't change the past, but we can absolutely make sure that we honor those who went before us and learn from their mistakes.
Yep.
Kamehameha the Great was followed by his son, Kamehameha the Dissolute and Weak, who died young.
Wait, is that his official?
No.
No, okay, not an official epitaph.
But
All
we
right,
discussed last week that he was dissolute and weak, and he died young, joining a huge percentage of Native Hawaiians whose immune systems were overrun by foreign European diseases. And thus he left the Hawaiian crown to his 9-year-old brother, who chose the incredibly original and regal name
Kamehameha III. I'm just gonna guess.
Yeah, you're right. It's amazing.
Listen, if you're gonna form a quote-unquote traditional monarchy,
I guess
you gotta
should start with the Louis effect. Yeah.
Exactly.
If you did not get a chance to listen to the Rise of the Monarchy, the first half of this two-parter, I highly suggest that you press pause now and come back to hear about the fall after. Because, order.
As always, please like and follow us on all social media sites. And if inclined, feel free to leave us a review or give us a 5-star rating. The more you do, the better we can get out to other people.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, iTunes doesn't care about quality, just clicks. So the more clicks, the more we get to do this. Help us help you. Now, let's keep this podcast pithy and get going.
Pithy is the name of the game this week because King Kamehameha the Great died in 1819. And the unified Hawaiian monarchy that he began ended just 74 years later. So to get there, we have to pass through 7 more monarchs, innumerable constitutions, a ton of broken treaties, and a lot of tax laws. So we are going to hit the highlights, but skip the minutia.
Wait, you mean we aren't going to get to discuss tax law?
Oh, a teeny, I think I have a sentence. If you're desperate.
Okay, well that's enough.
Basically,
I do enjoy tax law.
People don't want to pay them.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Fair.
Born Kaui Keauli, the eventual king Kamehameha III was the second son of Kamehameha the Great and his most noble wife, Queen Keopuolani.
Full brother to Kamehameha II the Dissolute.
Right, and full son of Kamehameha the Great.
Got it.
He was of the highest kapu, just like his brother, but he was still a child when he came to the throne. At 9 years old, he should be, learning his times tables, not ruling a country. And so he needed a regent, which historically always works out oh so well.
Things like hide you in a tower and kill you, or poison you, or just lose you.
Lose?
Yeah, just lose you.
Who was lost?
Kind of the kids in the towers. Kind of.
The princess in the tower? Is that okay? All right. I see where you're going with that. So the obvious choice of regent was the intrepid vice king, Queen Ka'ahumanu. She had co-ruled with her Hanai, or adopted son, Kamehameha II, and I think it's pretty safe to say that she took care of state business while he drank and made ill-conceived plans. She almost certainly knew more about the state of the kingdom than Kamehameha III, so she took over while he finished elementary school.
Fair.
Queen Ka'ahumanu, as we learned last week, was a fascinating and incredibly forceful woman. She was Kamehameha the Great's favorite wife, to whom he'd given his firstborn son to raise as her own. And she also had pulled a Kanye West of sorts, interrupting Kamehameha II's coronation speech to announce that actually she was supposed to rule.
I get it. Weak and ineffectual.
So, for better or for worse, she didn't let the loss of her adopted son keep her from her work. Despite never officially converting to Christianity, she was a very devout Protestant.
Minus the 2 husbands who were father and son.
Well, yeah. minus that. I mean, we all need our vices.
I mean,
Erica.
no judgment, just stating fact.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's something that the church would super smile
Probably
on.
not.
Yeah.
I definitely have full-on fascination and lots of questions, but
Yeah.
despite her unwillingness to break from that one last Hawaiian custom, she generally was a zealot. A Protestant zealot. She expelled any Catholic missionaries who clearly had just arrived too late to make their mark. And she also refused her people religious freedom. It was her way, and by her way, we do as she says, not as she does. Or the highway.
Like any true ruler.
Wow. I like how you're just like, yep, she's fine. She's got it.
Listen, the men do it. They do it this way.
I don't disagree. If a man married a woman and her daughter, I would also have questions.
I'm more so talking about, like, the do as I say, not as I do.
I see what, I'm just playing with you. No, I do agree that, rulers are fallible, just like people, and we all...
But not James the First.
James the Sixth.
Satan's
chief enemy.
Honor.
Hawaii at the time was, however, really struggling. New ideas, new cultures, new identities left a lot of people feeling helpless and lost. Violence and lawlessness abounded, theft was common, widespread drunkenness, vandalism, and of course, rampant venereal disease. Hawaii needed stricter laws and better enforcement.
Forced to accept a complete overhaul of religion and customs and culture, all while enduring the pain of losing 84% of your people. That's literally like multiple deaths per family.
Yeah, just in droves. Mostly it was entire families, entire generations just wiped out. It was aggressive. And so at this moment, the people looked to this strong ruler, Regent Queen Ka'ahumanu, and then she died.
Well, that's not helpful.
It's not.
It's not helpful at all.
Before her death, Ka'ahumanu felt that these new laws should be based on the 10 Commandments. Assisted by American missionaries, whom she was, very close with, she planned to recreate Hawaii's legal system around the Bible. And when she died, her regency was taken over by Kinau, Kamehameha the Great's daughter and the much older sister of Hawaii's boy king.
Well, there you go. Another woman in power. I'm happy to see it.
I will say, the Hawaiians do not seem to have a huge issue with women being in power. Like we talked about with Kapu, the separation of the gender was not because one was less and one was more. In many ways, it was just they separated the genders to keep this cleanliness. I think kind of kosher with the Jewish culture. But they really did not seem to have a problem with powerful, strong women, which is excellent.
Good for them.
Like her predecessor, the new vice king was also extremely pious. She not only encouraged the missionaries' influence, she actually increased their power through an effective unification of church and state.
That does not bode well for anybody.
No, it does not. By age 17, Kamehameha III was ready to rule, or at least he thought he was.
I definitely felt that way at 17, too.
Oh, I ruled the world at 17. I knew everything. He was extremely concerned because he felt that the missionaries had too much power and that the monarchy had, well, too little. The king and his regent were very much at odds as the future of Hawaii remained so uncertain. And the two continually butted heads, but in the end, they did reach a compromise. They devised a new government that split the leadership power into three: the king, the kuhina nui, or vice king, and a newly formed council of chiefs. Together, they drafted a new law code, the first to be formally written down in Hawaiian history, and it emphasized these punishments for lawlessness, theft, murder, drunkenness, adultery, the fun stuff. They also agreed on the need for better education. What had previously been reserved for the children of nobility was now to be shared with the common people. Free schools were established throughout the islands intended to promote literacy and the Protestant religion.
I'm shocked. Shocked, I say.
By 1840, Hawaii had a constitution that, for the very first time, gave the Hawaiian people representation within their own government, converting the island nation from an autocracy into a constitutional monarchy a la Great Britain.
Okay, so from a modern standpoint, yay, that all sounds good, but it's hard to believe that just 21 years before, Kamehameha the Great, uniter of all of Hawaii, was an autocratic ruler who skillfully played the world's most powerful nations against each other. And now, the monarchy is a figurehead. It's a pretty big change, and very quickly.
Yes, while most of Kamehameha III's constitutional changes were, I agree, for the better. At the time, as you say, it was a very big change, and it had to be a bit of a blow, I would think, for him personally. But you got to kind of look at the influences. Within Hawaii at the time, Great Britain was very prevalent, and they were a constitutional monarchy. And then, of course, the United States was a very big player and was completely democratic. So the fact that he remained king at all was something of a miracle. He could have just lost it. Kamehameha III, unlike his two female regents, was not convinced that Protestantism was the way forward.
Oh, I'm shocked.
Because, after all, they're literally taking his power away. While he accepted the monarchy's limitation of power, he really struggled to give up a lot of the old customs. For example, like his brother before him, he was in love and hoped to marry his actually full sister, Nahi'ene'ena. But that didn't go over well with these powerful missionaries or his Protestant big sister / regent, Kinau. And so, like many, many royals before him, the young king was shoved in a corner while the Council of Chiefs, who pushed for a more familial marriage to secure that noble blood, fought against the Protestant missionaries and their desire for a Protestant, but mostly completely unrelated, queen. The poor boy was just a pawn. So in 1832, he fell in love again with Kalama, daughter of the Honolulu harbor master and the eventual admiral of Hawaii's royal fleet. And this choice satisfied no one.
Because she's a commoner.
She wasn't royal enough for the chiefs or Protestant enough for the missionaries. But finally, this young monarch, we gotta give him credit, he stood his ground, and the two were married on Valentine's Day. I have no idea if that was on purpose or not, but it's cute. They became the first Hawaiian royal couple to practice monogamy, as in just one spouse.
Maybe that satisfied the missionaries. You can't win them all, but that's not nothing.
It's something.
It's not nothing.
But he did also have a prominent mistress and 2 illegitimate children, so I don't know how they viewed that. If it was cool because it's not legal, or if it was still bad because it was a sin to their way of... Anyway, but he and his new queen were absolutely beloved by the Hawaiian people, and the royal couple then had 2 legitimate children, although they sadly died in infancy.
Oh no.
We talked last week that there's going to be a lot of childlessness within the Hawaiian monarchy. It is not stated anywhere that I saw that it is definitely because of continual incest and inbreeding. But one could guess that affected at least some of the births. The first half of his reign really did look promising. It seemed that he reached a happy medium between the old ways and this new modernization. His Declaration of Rights, Constitution, and a collection of laws were all then called the Kumu Kanawai, or Foundation of Law. And they were based off of both Kapu traditions and Christian principles, so they did reach this nice medium. Kamehameha III also formally separated the Hawaiian state from the Protestant church, hoping that his people would not completely lose their culture to these zealot missionaries.
So... all of that sounds good.
Lovely.
So there has to be a but coming on.
Yeah, it's history. There's always a but.
Always a but.
Always a but. And sometimes it's huge.
I like big butts, and I cannot lie.
Well, perhaps the most...
You didn't laugh at what I really thought you were going to laugh at that.
You did it 3 weeks ago. You don't remember it? Actually, 3 weeks ago, you sang it.
Well,
perhaps the most promising action of his reign was the Great Mahele, or land division. Prior to this, all Hawaiian lands were the exclusive property of the monarchy, but Kamehameha III wanted his people to have their own share of their land. And so he parceled out land to Native Hawaiians with official and very legal titles, and this could have been a great new beginning.
Unfortunately,
many Native Hawaiians were unaware of the program and never received their share. And those that did often immediately turned around and sold their given land to foreigners to make a quick buck. So in the end, the foreigners bought up most of it and were happy to create major agricultural industries of rice, sugar, and coffee that were now legal and theirs and not Native Hawaiians. And from there, things got worse. Huge agricultural plantations need
labor. And thus, in 1852, the first of many Chinese immigrants were brought to Hawaii. And while these new workers were determined to make a better life for themselves, and they did become a large and important part of the Hawaiian population and culture, they were forced to work for starvation wages, they were treated terribly by the plantation owners, and they were refused equal rights. But most of all, with immigration comes disease. Smallpox arrived with the first wave of these Chinese laborers, and it devastated the local Hawaiian population again.
Oh no, we can't get much higher.
No, we really can't.
That percentage can't get higher.
We can't afford to lose many more.
No.
So, as one biographer said, Kamehameha III's rule saw the dying of one culture amid the birth pangs of another.
Yeah, man.
Which I thought pretty much summed it up perfectly. And then he died.
That tracks with this episode. Finally, you're the Debbie Downer.
As it's called the fall of the Hawaiian Monarchy. I'm not quite sure why anyone's very surprised by that, but yeah.
You would call me out.
So he got a cold, and then he just gone, poof, leaving his throne to his nephew, because both of his children had died in infancy, and his Hanai son, Alexander Liholiho, who then became, drumroll please,
Kamehameha the Fourth.
Yes. Number 4. As I'm going to refer to him because honestly, I'm just tired of typing Kamehameha. Number 4 was of a new generation, and number 4 was the fourth of 4 brothers. Oh, come on.
I mean,
it's just a fun coinky dink.
Is it a fun coinky dink, or did all 3 other ones have to die for him to get here?
No, they didn't. That's an interesting question. He did have 3 older brothers.
Wow.
But only he, the 4th son, was adopted by Hanai to the sadly childless king and queen, and he was named crown prince at a very young age. So while I'm sure the brothers were like, what the hell?
Yeah, I can't imagine that the older brothers were too thrilled about this.
Too pleased, yeah. Mm-hmm. But he was the 4th. The others didn't have to die. In fact, spoiler, one will become king next. So it's interesting to have it go in the opposite order. He was by far the most European, or I guess Western Hawaiian monarch so far. He was stylish, debonair, elegant. And like his wife, Emma Rook, who was the daughter of a chief and the granddaughter of John Young, one of the 2 British sailors that Kamehameha the Great had kidnapped and turned into his own statesman.
Oh my gosh.
So again, didn't have any problem intermarrying, intermingling, and giving power to new people. So number 4, like his wife, Emma Rook, was very well educated. He liked horseback riding and cricket, and he put on musicals and operas. He was likened by a few historians to Prince Albert, husband of Queen Victoria, the ruling British monarch at the time. And I think it's actually a really good comparison because he was pretty modest, intelligent, forward-thinking, pretty reserved. And his biggest concern, similar to Albert's, was the health of his people.
All of this sounds good. There's gotta be...
We're on the right path.
Yeah.
He begged... He begged the legislature to build a state hospital, but he was ignored, obviously. So instead, he and his wife, along with their rich friends, just financed the Queen's Hospital themselves.
Well, good for him.
I mean, really good. This is good stuff. He resisted missionary involvement in government. He was concerned that American Protestants might start to look at Hawaii as, like a part of America, which he rightly believed would result in annexation by the U.S. and the destruction of the monarchy and the Hawaiian independence and culture as we know it.
It's almost like he had a crystal ball. We got some divination going on.
And he really, really disliked America. In his youth, as part of his Western education, he had toured Europe and America. And while he loved Europe for its culture, he despised America for its racism. While traveling through Washington, D.C., a train conductor mistook him for an African American and asked him to leave his first-class compartment. Things were eventually explained, but the damage was done.
I cannot imagine a king being told, you need to leave your compartment.
And after the Hawaiians had been so welcoming to all of these foreigners, his wife is, I guess, a quarter white. And so it was no problem for them to have people of different look and stature and color and build come in and intermarry. They did not have this problem. So I think it was a very foreign idea to him and shocking, enormously disrespectful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Enormously troubling. Queen Emma did eventually give birth to a young Prince Albert.
What a nod.
Victoria was known to be very susceptible to flattery. And perhaps number 4 really knew how to be a statesman like his grandfather, Kamehameha the Great. And he was the first prince born to a reigning monarch in a very, 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 very long time because they kept not having children.
Wow.
However, Prince Albert died at age 4.
Oh.
And that was followed quickly by his devastated father, who just never recovered from his son's death.
God.
That was it. Goodbye to number 4.
That sucks. He seemed like he was really good.
He was, I'm gonna say, probably Hawaii's last hope at turning things round, I think. Personal opinion.
Okay.
Without an heir, the crown passed to number 4's older brother, Lot, who had served as military commander under his younger brother. And Lot became...
Kamehameha the Fifth.
Yes. Number 5. But not to worry, he will be the last Kamehameha.
I mean,
It's time.
good, but also sad.
He won't be the last monarch, just the last Kamehameha. Unlike his brother, number 5 was less European. He was educated in the same Western-style school, but he was a lot more like his grandfather, the Great, and he wanted Hawaii to revert back to the old ways. He intended to be an autocratic ruler, so he quickly adopted a new constitution to that effect.
You know, constitutions don't really work that great if you can change them on a dime.
And that will become more and more evident as literally ruler after ruler after ruler just throws the baby out with the bathwater and starts over again and again and again.
No.
In his new constitution, he didn't technically deny commoners voting rights, but he did limit voting to Hawaiian national property holders.
Okay.
Not very many of those, which basically took them away from the commoners who had either missed out on that land parcel or had been sold it to a foreigner. Number 5 also encouraged the revival of many Hawaiian traditions, including dying childless.
Oh, that was a low blow. But he didn't give his people voting rights.
So
I'm not that upset, sorry.
And also he never married,
Oh.
so he didn't really have the same opportunity. And supposedly he never married on purpose because he was desperately in love with his sister-in-law, the Dowager Queen Emma.
Oh my. Awkward at family get-togethers.
Yeah. Supposedly he proposed not until after brother had passed, and she said no out of love for dead brother. So that's not awkward. On his deathbed, number 5 knew that he was leaving his nation again without a leader. He offered the throne to his cousin, Bernice Bishop, who was a descendant of Kamehameha the Great, incredibly wealthy, cultivated, beautiful, charming, and basically, according to the Hawaiian histories, the epitome of Hawaiian female perfection.
Huh.
But she said no.
Oh,
Twice. She believed that she could do more through her philanthropy, and frankly, she did make an enormous impact on her people without taking the crown. But that is a story for another day. So, after begging Bernice twice to be his heir, number 5 died with no successor. And that was the end of the Kamehameha dynasty. So until next week, I'm Caroline.
No. No. I know there's at least one more.
Yeah, she's pretty famous. We'll finish off the monarchy because, sadly, it really won't take long.
Oh, dear.
Number 5 dies. Bernice Bishop refused to take it. And so now, what will we do? Like many European countries before them, Hawaii found itself without a leader and decided to just elect one.
Okay.
For life. There were 2 candidates. William Lunalilo, a distant cousin of number 5, and Colonel David Kalakaua, a collateral relation of the Kamehameha line. A word I learned from you.
That's right, you did. I was just about to say that.
I'm gonna give you credit, don't you worry. You have taught me so much about genealogy and like the way to read a family tree. It's disturbing, but
it's disturbing.
Some of the connections that you make.
Wait.
Well, I mean, connections for the Hawaiian incest episode isn't great. So yeah, you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do.
There were 2 candidates. There was a distant cousin and a collateral relation. Cousin Lunalilo won and became the first elected Hawaiian monarch, the People's King.
Pretty fitting, right?
Yeah. King Lunalilo was described by the Mark Twain, or Samuel Clemens, depending on
Who you ask.
He was described as charming and cultivated, although the two really formed a bond over their shared love for alcohol more than anything else.
Fair.
And it would be alcohol that would fell the people's king just 1 year after his election.
Oh, dear.
The Debbie Downering, I'm so sorry.
It just...
Wah, wah.
Yeah.
But within that 1 year, he did manage to get a few things done.
Oh, a new constitution?
Yes! He tweaked it. Because it's proven so very effective.
Yeah.
The eye roll is just so loud. He wanted to open it back up, make the Constitution more liberal after the autocratic adjustments that were made by number 5. But the main focus of his reign was actually leprosy.
That's
So fun.
something.
Erica, what do you know about leprosy?
Actually, I know a decent bit. Leprosy is a skin disease, yeah. And so you get these lesions on your skin, and it is passed to another person through touching those lesions.
Through contact, yeah.
Physical contact. And I know a lot of the time there were leper colonies you would be sent to as to not infect your family and friends.
Right.
To be among other lepers so that you could die in peace.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. It's called Hansen's disease now. They also found a cure, so that's lovely. You can't undo what's happened, but you can prevent it from spreading.
Huh.
But around the time of King Lunalilo's reign, the infections in Hawaii were on the rise, and they seemed to most aggressively affect Native Hawaiians, like pretty much every other disease, because they just had been so isolated for so long. And it led to the creation of the Kalawao settlement on Molokai Island, where Father Damien, a Catholic priest, made it his life's work to improve the situation there. Because originally, when they started sending people there, and it sounds nice to say, we're gonna send you to this leper colony, and of course you'll want to do this to save your friends and family. But in reality, they were sending them to this pretty much abandoned island and told them to live generally like feral cats until they just died. It was bad.
Yeah, that's not it.
It was not good. But Father Damien came in and he made huge strides, not only with researching the disease and encouraging the treatment of the individual sores and trying to keep infections from getting worse, he also made sure they had clean water and food, and eventually even jobs and schools.
Well, isn't that nice?
There actually is this great book called Molokai by Alan Brennert, and I highly recommend it. I loved it. But Father Damien did eventually catch the disease. He died of it himself after decades.
Yeah.
This was the big focus for the 1 year elected cousin king. But aside from this new board of health and the segregation of the lepers, he also quelled a palace mutiny.
Oh, now that's something.
Yeah, so he did it through discussion. It wasn't some sort of cool battle where he raged in and was like, I'll fight you to the death. But still, nice work. I know. Downers. I can't fix it. However, because of this...
Just had high expectations, man.
This will be a Debbie Downer episode. Expectations managed. But because of this small palace mutiny, he ended up having to disband the Hawaiian army, which left Hawaii without any kind of a military force.
That's not great.
Sitting ducks. It's not like they could have come up with a force large enough to fight off Great Britain or the U.S. if they'd wanted to just take it. But it's always good to be able to kind of... Have one. It feels better.
I would feel better for them.
I would too. I don't now. Also, like his predecessor, King Lunalilo didn't designate an heir.
When will they ever learn?
Supposedly, he wished for the Dowager Queen Emma to succeed him, and also supposedly he wished, again like his predecessor, to marry her. But she, again, refused.
This woman must have been like the Grand Dame.
She must have been something. Do you want to see a picture?
I mean, yeah. Okay. Yeah, like...
I don't think that all these men were proposing over her
Am
looks.
Am I, Erica, gonna ride into battle to save her honor or anything like that? No.
Would you ride into battle to save my honor?
But my point is, like, I've seen worse.
I think she's actually quite pretty, but she's not Helen of Troy.
No one is.
But whatever his intentions, he died before any formal proclamation or written statement could be made. And thus, it fell to the legislature to elect the next king. And they chose his formal rival for the throne, the collateral Kamehameha relative, Kalakaua.
Because we can't put a woman on the throne, right, with Emma?
Well, no, at least not completely. Dowager Queen Emma was enormously well respected, and it's been theorized that if the decision had been the people's, if they had had a democratic election, she would have succeeded. But in this case, Emma didn't really favor the American sugar planters, unlike Kalakaua. And as they say, money talks. So the legislature probably took some bribes or felt some influence or were pushed.
Push seems more likely. Pushed with money on the side.
That's the best kind of push.
Is it? It's the
Better than no money and just death.
Fair, but it's the destruction of empire.
True, but 50 years ago, Kamehameha the Great was just literally pushing people off of a 1,000-foot cliff.
I guess.
I'd take the money and run. But my morals aside, I wouldn't do it in this case. Anyway, Kalakaua will be Sai, the last Hawaiian king, but not its last monarch. Known as the Merry Monarch, he was cheerful, charming, and sociable. Known for his amazing capacity for alcohol. Supposedly, he could drink 4 to 5 bottles of champagne in just an afternoon and then walk away like nothing happened.
Same.
I've seen you at a party. 4 to 5 sips, sure.
Okay,
4 to 5
but
sips.
I will, in my defense.
Yes.
In my defense, I am much like...
Ding, 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 we're out of time. Okay, folks. It would suck to drink 4 to 5 bottles of champagne and still not feel that little tingly...
The bubbles.
Excitement and rush of, being tipsy. The bubbles. That would suck. Because, what a waste of good champagne. Anyway, like every ruler, he had his good and his bad traits, including his alcoholism. So let's start with the good, because that's more fun. And you've claimed I'm a Debbie Downer.
Is it more fun?
Better than the Debbie Downer shit.
Fair.
He wanted to bring Native Hawaiians back to the forefront, and he filled most of his administrative posts with Hawaiians.
Oh, that's good.
Much to the displeasure of the American business community, especially after they had literally just supported his rule over that of Emma.
Hoo-hoo. All right, bait and switch.
His reign was regarded as the first Hawaiian Renaissance.
Oh.
Not only did he bring Hawaiians into his government, but he also really tried to bring back some of his nation's culture, music, poetry, and of course the hula. He promoted good relations with foreign nations and took a year-long trip around the world, visiting Asia, Japan, Europe, the US, you name it. But he also had a habit of granting enormous and very profitable monopolies to his friends against his ministers' advice. But that was not a problem for him because he just fired anyone who disagreed with him.
He is settling into rulership quite nicely.
Really well.
Yeah.
His continual firing and rehiring created a lot of upheaval within the government, something that would come back to bite him in the ass, similar to other politicians we may or may not know of.
We don't name names here.
We would never, well, except historical names.
Yeah.
Once they die, we're happy to...
Trash them.
Yeah, we're happy to tread all over their bones. Kalakaua had grand plans. Not only was his palace, Iolani Palace, updated and now incredibly fancy, a far cry from the previous one-story building that was made of pink coral, this man wanted opulence. He dazzled. He dined in style. It was lovely. There was nothing of the Prince Albert in this dazzling king. And to go along with his fancy court, he wanted to create an empire.
Ooh la la.
Of what, you might say? He hoped to unite all of the Pacific Islands, with Hawaii as the leader, obviously, into a federation. And a few historians, as in almost all, have referred to these ideas as Machiavellian aspirations.
If you're gonna be the prince, be the prince.
Yeah, but he wasn't the prince. He was the alcoholic.
He really wasn't. But also, nobody is a Cesare Borgia.
Nobody is. Even Cesare
Nobody
didn't survive himself.
No, he didn't. He didn't.
No.
If only he didn't get dysentery. If only life didn't Oregon Trail him.
So it's interesting to think about all these what ifs and what could have been. But like his reign, this dream of his ended in humiliation. His queen, Kapiolani, and his sister, Princess Liliuokalani, went to England for Queen Victoria's Jubilee. Due to his health from alcohol, the king was forced to stay behind, and then all hell broke loose. His cabinet was overthrown, all government buildings were placed under armed guard, and a new cabinet was installed with a new constitution.
Again?
That was, again, a new one! Another one! And this one is called the Bayonet Constitution.
Kidding.
Yeah. This newest constitution absolved the king of pretty much all of his power, taking away his ability to appoint and dismiss his own cabinet and leaving him as absolutely nothing more than a figurehead. So when the queen and princess returned from their nice little jaunt overseas, they found a brand new political landscape dominated by American businessmen and a very ill and dying puppet king. He died soon after, leaving the hollow crown to his sister, Queen Liliuokalani, Hawaii's final monarch.
Oh my god, are we going to talk about her?
We are going to talk a little bit about her. She really deserves her own episode. Her life is just, frankly, it was incredibly tragic. In fact, when we were creating our children's series, Once Upon a History, I'd actually intended to include an episode about her. But upon doing the research, I decided against it, mostly because we titled our first season American Heroines. And while Liliuokalani was most certainly a brave heroine who tried her best to protect her people, she was not an American, and she really didn't want to be one. So I felt that it would be wrong to force her into a title that she truly despised.
Yeah. If we're going to honor people and their wants and desires, let's honor them.
I think we have a duty as historians to make sure that we present facts
Yeah.
and not try to whitewash history. Secondly, almost nothing goes right for this poor woman. She was unable to have children. Her husband married her for her familial influence and then cheated a lot. And then Hanai adopted his illegitimate children to raise, which was sweet, but
Must have been difficult.
and then she watched her brother lose his grip on power before being forced to step in. I mean, she was forced to step in as this final chess piece to be easily taken by the overwhelming power of the American businessmen who wanted the Hawaiian chessboard all to themselves.
Oh my gosh.
It was just not fit for a children's series,
No.
but it is perfectly dramatic for these pithy chroniclers.
I mean, it is dramatic.
You look so sad.
It is sad.
It is sad, and it's gonna get worse, so buckle up.
Oh.
Queen Liliuokalani ascended the throne 9 days after her brother's death, and her
No. Not another one.
I see.
I read ahead.
And her first point of order was yet another new constitution.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Which she hoped would restore the monarchy's power. I mean, it's a bit of a Hail Mary. She's like, oh no, I'll just take all my power back, and I'll give back voting rights to all of the people. And she did reasonably consider the Bayonet Constitution signed by her brother unlawful.
Sure.
Claiming that King Kalakaua only signed it under duress, pretty much thinking he'd be assassinated if he didn't.
And he probably would have.
Could have happened, yeah. Unfortunately, she was unable to overcome the strong pro-American elements in Hawaii, and so though she wrote this constitution, she couldn't force it through. Instead, she was forced to act against her own beliefs to save her nation from its next impending disaster, financial ruin. Hawaii needed money. They were suffering through a severe economic depression after the McKinley Tariff Act killed the free trade that had previously been between the United States and Hawaii. So finally, out of desperation, she ceded Pearl Harbor to the U.S. in return for duty-free imports and exports with America. She also, again out of necessity, signed two highly questionable bills. First, she legalized a government lottery, and second, she legalized the import and sale of opium.
Oh my. I mean...
To a society that is already heavily alcohol dependent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great.
That's not good.
Both were considered highly offensive to many even at the time, but Queen Liliuokalani felt that she truly had no choice. Hawaii needed money. Throughout all of this, enormous tensions over the subject of annexation to America continued to pull her people apart. Native Hawaiians were mostly against, but some were also for the annexation, and it became extremely divisive. Think Brexit times 10. And then one day, the U.S. warship San Francisco arrived and remained anchored in Honolulu Harbor, ready to protect American citizens and property by force, if necessary.
Of course it has.
Dun, dun, dun. So with that big sword of Damocles visibly reminding the small island nation of the might it was up against, Queen Liliuokalani continued to fight for power and freedoms that she would never get. Ironically, it was actually this last push for more monarchical strength in an effort to give Hawaiians more control over their own land that led to the breaking point. Key businessmen and politicians of Hawaii formed the Committee of Safety, which pushed, and I mean pushed, for annexation. They created a provisional government and militia and denounced the Queen for her autocratic policies.
Oh, that's rude. She's absolutely not autocratic.
All she was asking for was more monarchical power so that she could then appoint Hawaiians to their own government. But they turned it round cleverly and claimed that she just wanted to overthrow the Constitution that they had overthrown.
That they had made the previous person sign under duress.
Yeah.
So why is it the Committee of Safety?
No good reason. I think it likely saved their own financial interests, because it certainly didn't help with the physical or national safety. Things exploded when armed companies of citizens marched into government buildings and took control by force. And these citizens, they were not the Hawaiians.
Right.
The Committee of Safety announced that they now controlled government offices, and then they, quote-unquote, legally deposed the Queen. Outnumbered and with no other recourse, Queen Liliuokalani was forced to yield under protest on January 17th, 1893. And Erica, would you please read her final words as Queen?
Quote, I, Liliuokalani, by the grace of God and under the Constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom, Queen, do hereby solemnly protest against any and all acts done against myself and the constitutional government of the Hawaiian Kingdom by certain persons claiming to have established a provisional government of and for this kingdom. Now, to avoid any collision of armed forces and perhaps the loss of life, I do this under protest and, impelled by said force, yield my authority until such time as the government of the United States shall, upon the facts being presented to it, undo the action of its representatives and reinstate me in the authority which I claim as the constitutional sovereign of the Hawaiian Islands." Unquote.
I think you can see why I felt it would be disrespectful to her memory to include her in our series on American heroines.
Yeah, girl.
Anti-American.
I get that.
The new president of the provisional government, named Sanford P. Dole, and Erica, can you guess what Mr. Dole did for a living?
Oh, the juice we still freaking drink today, Dole?
What kind of juice?
Pineapples.
Pineapples. He is the pineapple king of the world, actually. So yes, Dole Plantation is still there. Huge popular spot when you go to Hawaii. You can get a piece of freshly sliced pineapple that they then dip into this melted chocolate. Oh, it's so good.
It's not.
But
it's not good.
It's not okay. It does not make up for your behavior. So, the new president, President Dole, or acting president, provisional government, whatever, he acknowledged the document, which was just basically a huge middle finger to him, and then proceeded to raise the American flag over Hawaii. 2 years later, Native Hawaiians made one last stand. They revolted, intent on restoring their queen, but the effort pretty quickly failed. Queen Liliuokalani was arrested and imprisoned, and though she was now legally known as Lydia Dominus, her royal titles having been stripped from her, she continued to sign her name as Queen Liliuokalani until the day she died.
Good for her.
And her people, too, called her their queen.
Yeah, because Lydia Dominus is not a good name.
It's not Queen Liliuokalani.
And that's very Mary Queen of Scots of her.
It really is, because...
And very Joanna the Sad of her.
Yeah, that's right. It's very similar, I thought, to Mary Queen of Scots. She's living under house arrest, and she died 22 years later in 1917 in her home. She left her people with the memory of a devoted monarch and the beautiful composition Aloha Oe, which is one of Hawaii's most recognizable songs and was featured twice in last week's episode. So, as the song says, until we meet again, listeners, I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica, and we are Pithily Yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!